I'm Sarah Borson-Keeter with REEC. As the commercial real estate industry examines ways in which it can work harder to promote racial diversity, I'm pleased to be speaking with Tammy Jones, Chair of the Real Estate Executive Council and CEO and co-founder of Basis Investment Group. Tammy, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to having a very robust conversation about a critical topic involving diversity in corporate America and on boards.
Where do minorities fit within the commercial real estate landscape today, from entry-level positions up to the C-suite?
So it is common knowledge, I think, at this point, that the commercial real estate industry has a huge diversity and inclusion problem, particularly with African Americans. And let's just talk about a couple of numbers. So a study from NAIOP indicates currently that we have about 78% of the senior jobs are held by white males. Now let's talk about that when we compare that to African American males. It's about 1.4%. And sadly, African American females do not even register, that the percentage is so low. And so that says a lot about the industry. I think if you step back and you think about some of the efforts, there have been efforts to improve diversity over the years. I've been in the business for 20 years, and I have seen us poke at diversity with more of a focus, I think, on early stage pipeline. And that's important. But when you look at the senior jobs in real estate, and then we're going to talk about boards separately, you get the sense that there's not only a succession problem to be in the senior ranks, but there's also a retention problem. And so I think that we see early stage efforts as a focus, but what we're realizing now, and through Real Estate Executive Council, I'm the chair of an organization that is really focused on this pipeline, and it's the acronym of the organization is REEC. And we have been putting together strategies that involve a multifaceted approach to attack the problem, address the problem of what is economic injustice in corporate America. And honestly, real estate is certainly a breeding ground for this because of the nature of the industry. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. A couple of things for me, the retention issue is super important. And I always say, you can't be it if you can't see it. And if you are a middle manager that's an African-American male or woman in real estate, and you look at the C-suite and you look at the board positions or independent directors, if it's a public company, and you can't really see a pathway for yourself, it's really difficult for the industry to retain you. And so focusing on early is good, and we need it, and writing checks is important to organizations that support efforts, but change starts at the top. And I think it's so important that we remember that, and it has to really flow through the culture of the organization. And so, the problem, I think we're finally having open and honest dialogue about this problem. And I think the George Floyd incident really shined a light on all of the various economic injustices, healthcare disparities, criminal justice. I mean, I can go on and on. But I think in this moment, we have an opportunity to really create a movement around trying to create a more even playing field, particularly in commercial real estate, which is where my work has been and where I'm committed.
What factors have held back minority participation in the industry, specifically for African Americans?
I think a couple of things. When I think about diversity, I want to start there. It's not only a moral imperative, in my view, it's actually good for the bottom line, because diverse teams produce better outcomes, and study after study shows this. And so it's really interesting that we have such a racial disparity in commercial real estate and across corporate America when we all know this. And there have, the McKinsey study talks about this, and there are so many other sources that really focus on both gender diversity and ethnic diversity and just diversity, and how that creates innovation and leads to better returns. That's the first thing. The second thing about real estate that's, I think, why we have an opportunity, because I want to really focus on the positives and what the opportunities are. Commercial real estate is a business that makes investment decisions on demographics, right? The markets, the population, the consumers. When we go to invest, by way of example, in a multifamily property, we want to understand, who the tenants are, what the neighborhood is. And so demographics matter in real estate, and diversification matters in real estate when you're building portfolios. But diversification of team doesn't seem to have the same level of importance. And that is something that I feel as a CEO and as a business leader, I challenge people on that. It's if you want to find alpha, high returns, if you want to make sure that you have the best teams, just like you're building your portfolios, composition of teams should matter. And so those are sort of the things that are the backdrop for the why. Now, why is commercial real estate particularly the big offenders in this, if you will? Well, commercial real estate as an industry is almost the perfect breeding ground for exclusion. And I'll say a couple of things about that. It's a legacy industry that has a very closed network. And sometimes that closed network and sort of family legacy business is very hard for African Americans to break into. So, we're not, many of us do not have families that were in the business. And I'll just tell you from my own personal story. I fell into commercial real estate. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 8 people, and my parents were renters because of just not having access to capital. And so for me, I didn't even really understand that industry. And so it's so important that we really expose African Americans to the industry. And one of the things that Real Estate Executive Council has done is we've created a high school program that at the end, it's called Real Estate Exchange. And at the end of this summer, and we will have exposed 400 African American and Latino kids from under-resourced backgrounds to commercial real estate in partnership with PRIA, which is a large foundation. They're our largest sponsor, and I just can't thank them enough, as well as in partnership with 3 universities, Cornell, MIT, and the University of Miami. And we did not let COVID stop us. We pivoted to an online platform, and I am just so grateful for all of that support. But that's early stage because we recognize that African Americans don't typically know about this $15 trillion industry. So that's one of the things we're doing. We don't have families that can get us jobs, right? Because we're not in the business. And sometimes you see, what happens when your families are in a business and you can get your children in the business. And so those things actually matter. Our families don't have startup capital if you want to start. Some folks go right into the business and are entrepreneurs because of having multi-generational wealth. Well, we can have a whole nother interview about that. But at this point in time, many African Americans don't have capital to go start a real estate business or start investing in real estate. And so those, I think, are some of the reasons. And then finally, I would just say the real estate business, above all, is about relationships. And it's not just access to capital. It's not just hiring and having relationships to sort of climb the corporate ladder because, you need sponsors to do that. But it's also about access to credit. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for a number of stakeholders, including some of the larger, public REEC real estate companies for partnership with African Americans. I think some of the private companies can partner, as well as banks, trying to you look at this problem and address it with a multifaceted approach. Now, I'll also say that real estate is a lot of private businesses that don't have to report what they're doing. And it really becomes apparent, and at least to me, being locked up in quarantine and doing all these webinars and being, watching many of the little screens like we're looking at right now, it was literally all white men. And maybe a white female every now and then, but very few African Americans. And so it was just interesting to me how it was being more reinforced to me because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we see this. So I am cautiously optimistic that in this moment, that there will be systemic change if we all work together. And I think another thing for me is I realized that even Real Estate Executive Council, and I'm the CEO of Basis Investment Group. I also run a foundation that has just been near and dear to my heart. It's called Basis Impact Group. We partner with REEC, and the foundation has one mission, which is to improve the diversity of women and minorities in commercial real estate. And so we will fund various efforts, and REEC, Real Estate Executive Council, is one of those efforts. With the REX program, we're a sponsor. But I feel at this point in time that I know that we can't do it alone. We absolutely need, in the real estate industry, the majority, I call them majority CEOs, or the white males, the 78%ers, we need their help. It needs to be a holistic solution where we all work together. And I think for the first time, I believe that everyone is acknowledging the problem with all the statements that went out across the United States. The outpouring was great, but it's not enough. Right? Now we need to talk about partnerships. And that's the one thing the real estate industry knows how to do so well. We partner, we leverage, we work together, we're able to partner across large transactions. So this should be something we can do.
Have you seen visible progress during the course of your career?
I've been in the business for 20 plus years. And as I mentioned earlier, I have seen various stages and phases of really trying to poke at the diversity problem with marginal results. And it's apparent to me why that is. So there's a lot of disparate efforts. This person's doing diversity and inclusion training. And I saw something, a quote recently, I don't know which social media place, but it said, the revolution is not going to come about because of diversity and inclusion training. It's good, it's important, but it's not going to create the systemic change that we need, the structural change that we need. And I think that there's a very simple reason. And as a CEO, this is just the way I think, which is I don't feel like there has been a comprehensive approach to this. And I think that there are 5 real strategies that, I think could be utilized to help frame this for people, and to even partner with REEC if need be, because we're making ourselves available to majority organizations that want our help. So the first thing is to create a diversity business plan, right? I don't know any business that I have launched or initiative that didn't have a comprehensive business plan that had 3 things. Number 1, concrete strategies, a list of them, and I'm going to talk about some of those. Number 2, having performance metrics, measurements. Number 3, having a team that's accountable, and not just accountable, the performance is tracked and measured, and their compensation is tied to the success, right? So imagine if we were going to start a multifamily business, you and I, Sarah, and we just said, well, we're going to go out and we're going to go visit some properties. We don't really have any IRR targets. We don't really have any, we don't know exactly what our, investment size is going to be. And you know what? We're not really assigned to this. And whether this initiative works or not, and launching this multifamily business, there's really, not an impact on my compensation or yours. What do you think would happen? It would not succeed. And so I really believe that we have these disparate efforts, early stage, which is important because I said we have a program. But unless you have the second thing, the diversity ecosystem, it's likely to not succeed. And the diversity ecosystem involves early stage, high school, like Microsoft and Google, to middle management. I would, challenge some of the majority corporations to say, before you go out and try to get all this pipeline, look at the African Americans in your organization right now. If you don't have many, that's one of your strategies, concrete strategies. But if you have a few employees that you think you can look to and say, have we helped these employees with sponsorship? Have we tried to see why they're not getting promoted if they're not getting promoted? Have we tried to put them in the areas at the corporation that are likely to be areas to help them create wealth and have a strong and robust career? And so I would just ask people to start there before you go rushing out. Realize what your culture is. And then obviously looking at your C-suite and trying to figure out why you don't have the diversity or inclusion of African Americans. And I don't want to hear you can't find us because you're not looking in the right place. I'm here to tell you that. And there, because we're here. And then as far as the board is concerned, the board has to drive strategy. And so your diversity ecosystem is really part of your concrete strategies. Look, do an audit across your organization. And then, we have the third, which I think is super important, is partnership. We talked about partnerships, leveraging partnership across all of the initiatives that I just discussed. Partnering, with folks that can help you hire, looking for trade organizations that have access to, like Real Estate Executive Council. There's other trade organizations, New America Alliance for Latinos. I'm a member of that organization. So leveraging partnerships is super important in trying to figure out how to, once you have your business plan, you understand that the ecosystem has to be a multifaceted approach and you can't do one thing and check the box. And so the partnership, so the chief diversity officers that are popping up everywhere, they need to be partnering because they can't do it alone. Just developing one strategy for one company, I think it's a bigger issue than that. And then I would also say, look at your number 4. Look at your spend. Your minority spend and who your vendors are. We can look to see who are our lawyers. Who are we hiring to help? If we're hiring appraisers, if we're hiring accountants. I mean, there are African American professionals that exist across all of these disciplines in real estate that we could push to make sure that there is diversification. At basis, 78% of my employees are women and minorities. We have invested and loaned nearly $800 million with other minority and women-owned real estate owners. And finally, 50% of our spend is with minority and women-owned businesses. It's because we measure it. It's because we have the concrete strategies, and it's because we care about, our success and our compensation is all tied to making sure that we meet all of our goals and targets. And so so I think that's really important, because if you don't measure the performance of something, you certainly will not achieve success. And I think that, this Pearson's Law, something like that, I read in an article actually today in Forbes. This is a very timely discussion. And then finally, number 5 is access to capital and credit. And I feel like we need to make sure that we are providing access to capital and credit for minorities across, and African Americans in particular, across this industry, because access to capital is how we can become entrepreneurs and how we can invest and how we can create wealth. And what I want companies to think about is, don't just focus on hiring. Hiring is good, we need it. And we talked about the ecosystem. Also focus on wealth creation, because those have to be hand in hand. And that's where access to capital comes in, which is so much harder for us. And access to credit lines, subscription lines, working capital lines. We don't have the same relationships with the banks that some other folks do that, again, have this a relationship business. And so I would just offer, there's so many ways to help. And I've had people, recently email me and say, what can I do? Where can I write a check? And I'm saying, you can write a check. We like that. But look at all the different ways that we just talked about. And just to summarize, diversity business plan. We have this creation of a diversity ecosystem that's going to involve all of the stakeholders. We talked about partnership. We're talking about looking at your minority spend. And we're also talking about wealth creation, access to capital and credit.
Do you see public disclosure of minority hiring as part of the solution?
Absolutely. I think that real estate, again, I mentioned, it's a private business, for many of the, particularly the, family offices and some other investment structures there. So there's no real need to disclose. But the public REITs, are obviously there. We can see what is going on. And I would just say that this disclosure has helped. Let's look at what's happened with women. And I'm happy that there has been a focus on gender diversity. I feel like it was needed, but given the focus on that and the fact that you have, the state of California, mandating that there be, 30% of women on public boards. You also have ISS focused on this. State Street, I think, said that, they were going to reject the entire slate of boards if they didn't include women, or if there wasn't a plan to include women. And so it shows that measurement matters, and focus matters, and shining a light on it matters. And so it's interesting because if you look at the Fortune 500 companies right now, a third don't even have a single Black person on the board, right? It doesn't make sense to me, because it really is, diversity of thought matters, and the richness of that, and I think it helps you make better decisions. And so I'm hopeful that there'll be a similar effort to look at ethnic diversity, particularly African Americans and Latinos, but all minorities really, to make sure that there's representation. And I think that the public REITs in particular are really great places for commercial real estate professionals. And again, REEC is the preeminent professional trade organization for African American executives in real estate. And so that's a great place for pipeline. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to work with REITs, but we have to make sure that there's public disclosure. We talked about things needing to be measured. And I feel like the more transparent people are, and then the more we're discussing this, we have to take those discussions and put them into action. And I'm a big believer in metrics and business plans, as you can hear, and tracking success.
Where else do you see possible solutions coming from?
So I think with the board, let's just stick on that for a moment. I feel like there could be a number of stakeholders that can help. We talked about, some of the proxy firms, making sure that they're making it important and necessary and accountable for folks to have ethnic minorities on boards. We can talk about some of the largest investors that are, deciding some of these elections and voting, making sure that they're pushing that initiative. We can also talk about search firms and making sure that you're picking the search firms that really have success in placing ethnic minorities on boards, or really have it as part of their business plan and their ecosystem, and not going to the same search firms that are delivering the same all white slates. And even if the board has a white woman on it, it's still an all white slate. And I just want people to realize that that's what we see, but that's why diversity of thought is really important, because it's your different lens. So when I see a board, someone else is telling me, wow, that's really diverse. And I don't think it's really diverse, right? Because of being an African-American woman, right? I see some diversity, gender diversity, of course, but in terms of ethnicity, I think that it's so apparent to us when we see that. And so I think that that's important. And as far as the sort of broader solutions, I think we talked about them. It's just, those 5 strategies that I mentioned previously, I think are important to keep in mind. And if you don't know where to start by looking at your leadership team, start by looking at your boards, look at your current employees and see if are there African Americans and how are they faring in their careers. You can have one of my concrete strategies when we're doing back to our business plan could be, I'm going to make sure that each one of my African American employees has a sponsor, because I know it's harder for them to make it. So we're going to partner them with Sarah, or we're going to partner them with Jim, and try to really understand how to help them progress in the corporation if it's a private company. And I think that those are some of the low-hanging fruit. Partner with trade organizations, again, like REEC and some of the others. And I also challenge even some of the larger trade organizations that REEC wants to partner with. Again, we can't do it alone. So we're looking to, we have this partnership with PRIA. We have a partnership with NAIOP. We are talking to ULI. Some of these, very large organizations, trade organizations that are really, we're all trying to come together. We're, recently been talking to NMHC. And these are powerful trade organizations that have a lot of members who, could help this problem if we all, come together. Because again, the thing that I've learned most in this moment has been that we can't do it alone. And I keep stressing that because we've tried that. We've tried poking at it. We've tried disparate attempts. And I just know that a comprehensive, holistic, multifaceted approach is the only way that we're going to make real progress. And that has to be hiring, and it has to also involve a way to, access capital.
Can and should corporate boards be doing more? And have you seen any good actors out there that have stepped up and answered the call?
I think we talked a little bit about that already. It's because all the topics are kind of interrelated. It's hard to like separate them, but absolutely. Corporate boards we have to figure out how to make the representation of African Americans and other ethnic minorities on corporate boards transparent. We have to measure it. We have to create a pathway. We talked about the ways that you can put pressure because the power, the one who controls the purse strings has the power. And I feel like sometimes we're going to have to push that, meaning the folks that are voting these slates in need to really focus on whether or not they believe that this is the best board if it has, for example, no African Americans or other minorities on it. I mean, that just doesn't make sense in 2020. We saw that the focused effort with metrics and with the support of the decision makers with gender worked. So I am optimistic that if we say, you know what, we understand we have this issue across corporate boards, let's try to ensure that everyone, across the whole ecosystem is focused on this and realizes the benefit. Because again, it's a moral imperative, yes, of course, right? But for me as a CEO, it's about producing better outcomes. And that's what I want. That's what any independent director is that's your job, is to create value for shareholders. And so we need to make sure that the leadership teams and the boards understand that not having an ethnic minority on the board is probably going in the wrong direction in terms of creating the best returns, because you want to make sure that you have everybody's perspective. And then the other thing is to ensure, I mean, think about what has the progress, and I'll come back to my point, but the progress that's been made with women. I think this 2019, I saw that more than half of the independent directors were women in the REIT space. And that is huge. That's huge progress. But it wasn't as positive for African Americans. I think it was like 7.7%, and or something less than 10%, I'll say. So that's the opportunity. Because when I see a problem, I always look at the opportunity. So you can look at the trajectory with the gender diversity, and you can now see that has been, in some cases, gender diversity was diversity. So that was a little bit at the expense of ethnic minorities. I don't think there's been as much progress, and let's just be real and say it, because we have to say it in order to correct it. And so I think that there is an opportunity for us to all work together to focus on that. And again, one of the things that REEC is doing, I can't underscore this enough, is trying to create this diversity ecosystem, to create this pipeline, so that in the real estate business, so that way there is access for search firms to contact REEC across the entire spectrum. Because again, I feel like it's super important to make sure that we are looking at every step of the pipeline chain.
On a personal level, are you encouraged by the surge of interest in racial diversity? And do you think that this is a time that meaningful change could actually happen?
I would say that I am cautiously optimistic. But I have seen efforts, kind of have a focus and then sort of fizzle out, during my career. And I think that it's possible. And I want to be hopeful. And I believe that with us coming together, I keep talking about partnering, because the problem is so big and so deeply rooted that we need each other to get to solve this. So I believe that if we can take some of those public statements and really turn it into action and really work together in a way that is comprehensive, in a way that is measured, in a way that is transparent, and just trying to come together to focus on this problem with the amount of aptitude that we all have to be able to focus on this problem, I believe that we will we'll see results. So I'm hopeful, and you know, it's certainly an opportunity for change, and I'm a big believer in systemic and structural you know, change. I believe that it can happen. But I don't, you know, I haven't seen it to date. So what you hear in my voice is a little bit of, you know, caution.
Tammy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited about, you know, seeing some change, and I'm also thankful to NAREEC for deciding to, you know, focus on this issue and to be so transparent and to have an authentic conversation, which I think is super important to affecting change.
And for more news and information on REITs and listed real estate, be sure to visit NAREIC's website, REIT.com.